The call came just after midnight, rain still tapping on the window like a reminder that nothing ever stays clean. Detective Mark Harlan walked through the flickering hallway of the old apartment block, the smell of metal and wet carpet thick in the air. Rachel Danner had been found dead in her apartment, throat cut, eyes open. Mark had seen worse, or so he thought. When he saw her face, something inside him went still. The crime scene layout was perfect, too perfect. It mirrored one of his own solved cases from 2 years ago, even the positioning of the body. The rookie snapped photos while Laura Price stood frozen near the doorway, her flashlight trembling. She whispered, "How did you know her name before I said it?" He couldn't answer because he didn't know why he did. Would you still trust your partner if they seemed to recognize the victim of a murder they'd never met? Mark couldn't sleep. He sat on his couch, still in his trench coat, staring at the note. Every letter matched his handwriting. Same slant, same uneven spacing. But he hadn't written it. Or had he? The thunder outside cracked like gunfire. And for a moment, he swore he heard Rachel's voice whisper his name. He grabbed his old case files, flipping through pages until he found it. Case hash 442. The Valentine murder. Same setup, same handwriting. His own signature at the bottom of the report. Laura called, asking if he was okay. He said he was fine, but his voice didn't sound like his. Somewhere inside him, a quiet truth began to wake. At the precinct, whispers followed him like shadows. Everyone had heard. The note, the pattern, the coincidence. Captain Reed tried to keep order, but suspicion spread fast. Laura stood by Mark's desk, quietly watching him flip through the evidence again and again, searching for something that wasn't there. "You think someone's setting you up?" she asked. "I think someone's copying me," he said. His tone was wrong, too calm. The board behind him filled with photos of victims, red string and timestamps that circled back to his own shifts. The deeper he looked, the more it all seemed to point home. That night, he returned to Rachel's apartment alone. The building was sealed, but his badge still opened doors. The silence inside was heavy, electric. He kneeled near the bloodstain, running a gloved hand across the floorboards. Then he found it, a faint mark beneath the bed, carved into the wood. His initials. He froze. The edges were old, not fresh. Someone had made sure he'd find them. As the wind rattled the broken window, his flashlight flickered out. For a second, he thought he saw someone standing behind him in the reflection of the TV screen. Someone who looked exactly like him. Mark drove home in silence, rain smearing the windshield like melting glass. His mind replayed every case he'd solved. The patterns, the victims, the precision. Had he been chasing himself all along? His hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles turned white. When he stepped inside his apartment, he froze. Every wall was covered with photos, Rachel's, his old victims, each labeled in red marker. And in the center of it all was a fresh Polaroid of him standing over Rachel's body, time stamped an hour before he got the call. The photo wasn't evidence. It was a warning. Would you still believe you were innocent if the proof said otherwise? Mark didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke, drenched in sweat. The Polaroid still hung on his wall. He tried tearing it down, but behind it was another photo. Older, faded, showing the same room, same pose, same blood pattern on the floor. It was dated 5 years ago, long before Rachel's death. Panic surged. His phone buzzed. Laura. "They found something in your old case files," she said. "Your signature? It's on reports you didn't write." He stared at the ink on his fingers, realizing they were smudged red, maybe from the wall. Maybe not. What if the killer wasn't copying him? What if they were completing his work? At the station, Captain Reed's voice thundered through the hallway. He demanded answers. Mark couldn't give. "These signatures, these timestamps. What are they?" Reed barked. You think I forged my own name? Mark snapped. The silence that followed was heavy. Laura stood nearby, eyes on the floor, unable to meet his. When Reed finally dismissed him, Laura pulled Mark aside. "Something's wrong with you," she said quietly. "You're not seeing what I see anymore." Mark's hands trembled. He wasn't sure if she meant the evidence or his mind. Mark returned to the archives, a maze of dusty shelves and forgotten case boxes. His flashlight beam danced across old evidence bags, names he remembered, crimes he solved, or thought he did. Then he found it, a sealed envelope marked "Confidential, Harlan." Inside was a black and white photograph of him younger, standing beside Captain Reed and a woman he didn't recognize. On the back, scrawled in ink, were the words, "The first one never forgets." His throat tightened. He dropped the photo and heard footsteps echoing behind him, too close. When he turned, no one was there. He met Laura at a late-night diner, one they'd used during long stakeouts. She looked tired, hair falling loose around her face. "I checked the logs," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Rachel called your number 3 times the night she died." Mark frowned. "My phone never rang." Laura leaned closer. "Maybe you answered." For the first time, Mark couldn't read her eyes. She wasn't afraid of the killer anymore. She was afraid of him. Outside, thunder cracked, and the power flickered. In the brief darkness, he saw his own reflection in the window, and for a heartbeat, it smiled back at him. That night, Mark sat before his bathroom mirror, staring into his reflection until his own face began to blur. He pressed his palms against the cold sink. "It's not me," he whispered. His breath fogged the glass. Then, slowly, letters began to appear on the mirror's surface, as if written from the other side. "It is now." He stumbled back, heartbeat pounding. The lights flickered, and for a split second his reflection didn't move. It just stood there, smiling faintly, as a drop of blood trickled from its nose. The same drop appeared on his own. Would you still recognize yourself if the mirror refused to follow? By morning, Mark couldn't tell if he'd slept or just blacked out. The mirror message was gone, but the blood stain on his sink wasn't. At the precinct, Captain Reed called him in again, this time with internal affairs waiting. They had photos, timestamps, surveillance footage, everything pointing to him. He sat through it, all in silence, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. "This isn't you," Laura whispered, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Mark stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Then who the hell is it?" he shouted. The room went still. Even he didn't sound like himself anymore. That night, Laura went to Mark's apartment. She found the door unlocked. The place looked different, emptier, colder, as if someone had already packed up and left. On the wall where the photos once hung, there were only outlines left behind, pale squares on stained wallpaper. She found a single photograph on the floor, her own face caught in a candid shot, smiling in the squad car. On the back, in the same crooked handwriting, were 3 words. "Next is you." When she heard the floor creak behind her, she spun around, only to find Mark standing in the doorway, expression unreadable. "Why was my picture here, Mark?" Laura demanded. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. Mark looked genuinely confused. "I didn't put it there," he said, stepping closer. "You have to believe me." She reached for her gun, not to aim, just to remind him she could. "Believing you is getting harder," she said softly. Mark's eyes darkened. "Then don't," he muttered. For a long second, neither moved. Rain hammered the window between them, and thunder swallowed the sound of both their breaths. When the lightning flashed for a split instant, there were 2 Marks standing in the room. Captain Reed summoned Laura privately. He poured coffee, but didn't drink it. "He's slipping," Reed said. "You know it." Laura's jaw tightened. "He's sick, not guilty." Reed leaned in. You can't protect him. There's talk he's been manipulating evidence for years, covering his own trail. She wanted to argue, but Reed slid a new folder across the table. Inside were phone logs, DNA samples, and a photo. Mark's car parked outside Rachel Danner's apartment hours before the murder. Laura's hands shook. Reed's voice softened. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is stop them before they fall. Or is she knew. Laura followed Mark later that night. He drove aimlessly through rain-slick streets, turning corners without direction, eyes blank behind the wheel. Finally, he stopped at the old warehouse district, the same place where his first case ended. He stepped out, walked to a rusted door, and pushed it open. Inside, rows of photographs hung from strings, swaying gently in the damp air. Each face was one of his victims, and now, hers among them. Laura's heart pounded. "Mark," she called softly. He didn't turn. "I think I finally understand," he whispered. "I was never solving anything. I was remembering. Would you still call it justice if the memories you trusted were the crime itself?" Mark didn't remember leaving the warehouse, but somehow he woke up back home. Soaked, shivering, his shoes muddy. The clock read 3:17 a.m. On the table lay a new folder he didn't own. Inside were surveillance photos, each showing him entering the precinct, signing files, even talking to Captain Reed. The timestamps matched the hours he was elsewhere with Laura. He stared at his own image, the way his mouth curved, his posture slightly wrong. "Someone's using my face," he whispered. But deep down, another voice inside him said something worse. "What if they're not?" He took the photos straight to Reed. The captain's expression hardened as he flipped through them. "These came from a city camera," Reed said. "You Harlan." Mark slammed a fist on the table. "It's not me. Look at the gate, the hands. It's wrong." Reed leaned back. "Wrong or not, the badge number checks out." Laura entered halfway through, watching them both. For a second, she looked at Mark like a stranger. "If that's not you," she asked quietly, "then who's been signing your reports for the past month?" The silence afterward was worse than accusation. It was belief starting to die. Later that day, Mark followed a hunch, one that felt more like instinct than logic. He traced the security feed's coordinates to a derelict office building on the edge of town. The elevator still worked, humming low like a heartbeat. On the top floor, he found a small investigation room, identical to his own at the precinct. Same corkboard, same photos, even the same cracked coffee mug. On the desk was a recorder still running. He pressed play. His own voice filled the room. Day 12. Laura suspects. Reed, almost convinced. "Don't let them remember." His breath caught. "Don't let who remember?" He called Laura to meet him there, needing someone else to see. But when she arrived, the room was empty. No recorder, no files, nothing but dust. "It was here," he insisted, pacing the room. Laura's eyes darted around. "Mark, there's nothing." He pulled open drawers, tore open boxes, but everything he touched turned up blank. His hands began to shake. Then he saw it, her reflection in the window. It smiled at him even though she didn't. "Laura," he whispered, "don't move." Her reflection kept smiling. Herself still did not. They left the building in silence. But as they reached the parking lot, Laura stopped. "Mark, your car's already here." He frowned. "I drove the other one." She pointed to the idling sedan. The driver's seat was empty, until a shadow shifted inside. They froze. Mark approached slowly, rain pelting the asphalt. Through the windshield, he saw himself sitting there, calm, dry, and smiling faint. The other Mark raised a hand and waved. Laura screamed his name as headlights flared white. The car peeled away into the storm, leaving the echo of tires and a single thought in Mark's mind. He's real. Would you still trust your memories if someone else was living them for you? Mark locked himself inside his apartment and covered every mirror. The city outside felt distant, unreal. The sound of rain had turned into something else. A rhythm, like footsteps pacing just beyond his door. Every photo he'd ever saved was gone, replaced by blank white paper. His phone buzzed. It was Laura. He couldn't answer. Instead, he listened to the voicemail. Her voice was low, trembling. "They found blood in your trunk, Mark. It matches Rachel's." He dropped the phone. The papers on his walls began to curl inward, like they were breathing. He whispered into the dark. "If I didn't do it, who did?" The silence whispered back. "You." Captain Reed came knocking, but Mark didn't open the door. Through the peephole, he saw Reed's silhouette waiting in the rain. "You need to come in," Reed called out. "This isn't going away." Mark stayed silent. After a moment, Reed slid something under the door. A small flash drive inside an evidence bag. "Watch it," he said, voice rough. Mark plugged it into his laptop. The video showed the crime scene at Rachel's apartment. He watched himself step into frame, kneel beside the body, and look straight into the camera. The mark on screen whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." Then the feed cut to static. Laura broke into Mark's place that night, terrified he might do something irreversible. The air inside was thick, stale, as if it hadn't been breathed in hours. She found Mark sitting on the couch, motionless, eyes fixed on the blank TV screen. "Mark," she whispered, stepping closer. "What did you do?" His lips moved, barely audible. "He is not gone," he said. "He's here." The TV flickered to life. Grainy footage of Laura herself entering his apartment just moments ago, watched from another angle. Then the screen panned, revealing the cameraman behind it. It was Mark. Laura backed away, shaking. "You've been filming me," she demanded. Mark's gaze was empty. "Not me," he murmured. "Him." She looked around. No one there. The TV cut to black, then flickered again, now showing the hallway outside his apartment. A figure approached the door. Mark again, holding a knife. "We have to go," Laura whispered, pulling him toward the fire escape. But when she turned, he wasn't following. The real Mark stood still, staring at the door as the sound of keys jingled on the other side. Two versions, one entrance. No escape. Laura fled down the fire escape into the storm, heart pounding. Behind her, a scream tore through the rain. She turned back, staring up at Mark's window. It was shattered, the curtains whipping in the wind. Inside, she saw him, or one of him, staring down, face unreadable, drenched in blood. The police arrived minutes later, but the apartment was empty. Only the camera remained, still recording, aimed at the mirror across from the couch. When the footage was reviewed, the final frame showed Mark sitting there, perfectly calm, whispering, "Now we're even. Would you still believe you exist if your reflection refused to disappear?" The next morning, police sealed off the building. Mark's apartment was declared a crime scene, but there was no body. Only fingerprints, his, on everything. Laura watched as forensics moved in. She couldn't shake the feeling he was still watching her. Then Reed called her into his car. "You need to see something," he said. He handed her a manila folder stamped, "Archived Homicide, 2015. The victim's name made her stomach drop. Rachel Danner. "That's impossible," she whispered. Reed nodded grimly. "Same name, same address, same cut on the throat. And guess who solved it?" She opened the report. "Detective Mark Harlan." Laura drove to the old precinct storage, heart hammering. Deep in the archives, she found the 2015 case box, the Rachel Danner murder. Inside were photos of Mark, younger, smiling at a press conference. Beneath that, a psychiatric evaluation labeled temporary suspension. Mental evaluation required. The report read, subject exhibits identity dissociation. Believes in presence of double self. Laura's hands trembled. A Polaroid slipped out. Mark with the first Rachel, arm around her shoulders, both smiling. On the back, in faded ink, she was the one who helped me remember. Meanwhile, Mark walked along the highway, soaked and dazed. His clothes were stained, his hands trembling. He followed the sound of sirens in the distance, not sure if they were real or remembered. Every passing car's reflection in puddles showed him in a different pose, laughing, crying, glaring. He reached an abandoned building he somehow knew. Inside on the wall hung dozens of photographs, every one of Rachel, every one ending with her lying dead. His breath caught. In the last photo, he saw her holding the camera. He wasn't the detective. He was the story she never finished writing. Ace? Say. Laura arrived minutes later, calling his name. Mark turned toward her slowly, eyes hollow. It wasn't her the first time, he said quietly. It was me. She tried to help me remember the murders I solved, but they were mine. Laura's voice broke. Mark, stop. You're not making sense. He smiled faintly. It's all the same case, Laura. Every one of them. Every victim was me, dying a little at a time. She stepped closer, hand outstretched, but the floor creaked behind her. Another Mark stepped from the shadows, identical calm. He's right, the second one whispered. Laura raised her gun. Tell me which one's real, she demanded. Both Marks smiled. We both are, said one. We never stopped being, said the other. Reed's voice shouted from outside. Price, don't do it. She hesitated. The calm Mark stepped closer, eyes filled with pity. He's the disease, he said, nodding toward his twin. I'm the cure, the trembling one whispered. No, he's what I buried to survive. Before she could choose, a shot rang out. Reed burst in to see one Mark crumpled, the other standing over him, gun shaking. Laura dropped her weapon, whispering, Which one did I just kill? No one answered. Would you still fight for the truth if it meant destroying the last piece of yourself? Rain hammered the hospital windows while sirens wailed somewhere far below. Mark drifted in and out of consciousness, wrists cuffed to the bedrail. His chest burned where the bullet had grazed him. Laura sat across the room, silent, eyes red. Tell me which one you are, she whispered. He turned his head slowly. I'm the one who remembers, he said. A detective entered, clipboard ready, reading him his rights, but Mark only laughed under his breath. Rights? He murmured. I gave those away the first time I decided who deserved to live. Outside the door, Captain Reed watched through the glass, face unreadable, as thunder rolled like judgment. Later that night, Mark asked for a recorder. One last statement, he said. The nurse hesitated but obeyed. He stared into the lens, voice steady now. I used to think the killer was someone who left pieces of themselves behind. Turns out, I've been collecting myself all along. He described every murder, how each victim mirrored his own mistakes, his failures, his sins. Rachel tried to write about it. She thought exposing me would stop me, he said softly. She didn't know she was the only thing keeping me human. He pressed stop, then whispered to no one. Now she's gone. There's nothing left to solve. Laura watched the footage later, alone. The more she listened, the more she noticed something impossible. The voice wasn't perfectly aligned with Mark's lips. Every few seconds it spoke before he moved. When she slowed the playback, she realized two voices overlapped. The calm one and the trembling one. The second Mark had never died. He'd become part of the first. She turned off the monitor, hands shaking. Behind her, the dark window reflected her own image. But in the reflection, Mark stood beside her, whispering, You found me. Reed ordered Mark transferred to a psychiatric ward. As guards led him down the hallway, His steps slowed, near a mirror mounted for security. He paused, staring. The reflection smiled first. "You can't lock away a memory," it said, though his mouth never moved. Reed barked for them to keep moving. Mark leaned close to the glass. "You're right," he whispered, "but you can forget one." Then, with sudden force, he slammed his head into the mirror. The glass shattered, scattering pieces across the floor, each shard catching a slightly different version of his face. Weeks later, Laura visited the ward. The doctor said Mark no longer spoke. He simply sat by the window, drawing circles on the condensation over and over. When Laura entered, he looked up and smiled faintly. "You solved it," he said. "You finally solved me." She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "No, Mark. You were never the case." He pointed at the glass. Outside, rain washed the city clean, but their reflections remained. Two figures, side by side, one fading slower than the other. Would you still call it justice if the truth refused to die with you?